From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and we're really excited for our guest today. This is episode 20. Before we get to it, though, I want to connect you with our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas of health: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. Professionally, in spite of the fact that I'm a supplement minimalist, this is a product that I recommend to just about all of our clients, as I view it a lot more like whole food nutritional insurance. Its ingredients have been carefully selected. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, you get prebiotics, probiotics, and you won't find any harmful chemicals, artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, or any kind of added sugars. Works really well for folks who are gluten and dairy free. And I love it personally for younger athletes who may have holes in their diets, and college and pro athletes who may have complex travel schedules where they can't always get quality food while they're on the road. On a personal level, I use this every single day of the week. I have 3 kids under the age of 5. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an avid lifter. I split my time between 2 parts of the country. So needless to say, life's stressful and sleep deprivation is a real thing. So with that in mind, I lean really heavily on Athletic Greens for my immune support and really believe it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of this crazy lifestyle. So get your vital nutrition in 30 seconds or less at athleticgreens.com/Cressey, where you can claim your special gift of 23 travel brackets. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, athleticgreens.com/CRESSEY, and you can claim your special gift to get 20 free travel packets. Today's guest is a starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. He grew up in North Carolina and attended the University of Georgia after having Tommy John after his senior year of high school. He went on to become a second-round pick in 2012 by the Atlanta Braves and quickly ascended through the minor leagues, making his major league debut in 2013. Thereafter, he was traded to the Dodgers and competed on teams that went to the World Series in both 2017 and 2018. 2017 was a breakout season for him when he went 16-3 with a 2.72 ERA and was named to the National League All-Star team. This past offseason, he was traded to the Cincinnati Reds. Over the course of his career, he's pitched as both a starter and a reliever, so he brings a unique perspective to the podcast. We're excited to welcome Alex Wood. All right, welcome to the show, Alex.
Hey, what's going on, man?
All right, this is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to start off. You're a North Carolina guy, born and raised. It's kind of a mid-Atlantic region. It's somewhere between, what we deal with our Northeast pitchers in terms of not having a lot of workload versus what you see with kids in Florida and Georgia. Were you a baseball-only guy? Were you a multi-sport guy? What was your approach to development, from, the young ages all the way up through high school?
Yeah, so, I played all kinds of sports pretty much all the way up until I was probably 13. I played tennis, soccer, golf, basketball, football, baseball. I pretty much played everything you could play as a kid. And then as I got done with Little League, after your 12-year-old, your last season of Little League, and you start to realize, like, hey, I like this baseball thing a lot, and you start playing year-round, essentially. Once you get to age 13 and on, I pretty much only played baseball at a high level. I would still play pickup basketball and still play a little bit of tennis and a lot of golf. But from a organization standpoint, baseball was pretty much it for me from age 13 on in through high school.
I love the point about still making sure you're doing other stuff. It's not just like baseball all the time. You had pick up hoops on the side, and you were able to get out and do some different stuff to give yourself that variety that you'd otherwise miss.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And plus it's fun playing pickup basketball and going golfing with your friends and doing all that stuff too. So you never at the time obviously never thought about the impact it could make on your future, but definitely fun stuff that I still like to do.
Were you a two-way guy in high school, or was it pitcher only at that point?
So it depends on the year that you ask. So my freshman year of high school, I was pitcher only. Sophomore year, I pitched and hit some. My junior year, I actually had I guess looking back would be a precursor to when I had Tommy John my senior year of high school. I had a stress reaction in my UCL my junior year, so I was hitting and playing some first base and DHing.
Hmm.
But then once that happened early in my junior year, all I did was pitch when I was healthy. And then
Hmm.
my senior year, I raked and pitched as well.
I love it. So, when you were a guy that was coming up and you started to kind of focus on the baseball specialization side of things, were you a guy that did you just throw you around? Did you find gaps in the schedule where you would actually take time off? Or, do you think that was some of the stuff that led to the Tommy John at a young age as well?
Yeah, so for me, I was lucky to be around some pretty smart people. I went to
Yeah.
two different high schools, had two really good high school coaches, uh, travel ball coaches, and some different organizations that had an idea of what they were doing. So I guess it depends on what you consider throwing you around. I mean, we had pretty like normal breaks to where you start in December throwing, and then work your way in January in high school, playing scrimmages and practicing, and then into your high school season. And then I'd play summer ball, and then you would probably have, I would say we'd take a couple weeks after the summer ball schedule ended when school started, and then you
Hmm.
have probably a month or so where you maybe would practice a couple times a week or do whatever, and then get ready for play fall travel ball, and then
Hmm.
that would usually end. I think the big ender, at least when I was coming up, was like going to Jupiter and the WWBA in the fall and stuff. And then once
Hmm.
that was done, I wouldn't throw for probably, I would say, a month. It's kind of like
Yep.
felt like I was kind of on a college schedule almost when I was in high school.
I got you.
Do I think that contributed to my arm? Hard to say. I'm going to say no, because I was doing shoulder care stuff. I mean, from the moment I set foot in my high school, my freshman year, we had a pretty solid program laid out from a strengthening standpoint. I mean, it was basically like going to college for me
Hmm.
from a baseball standpoint. So it's hard to
Hmm.
point the finger one way or the other,
Yeah.
And I actually, my injury history, fortunately, was long when I was in high school, and then now, I haven't had a whole lot of stuff, knock on wood, since I started my pro career. And so that limited me in some capacities in high school to where sometimes I wouldn't pitch in the summer because of an injury. Whether
Yep.
I broke my thumb one year slipping doing air conditioning, and just little things that popped up like that for me
Yeah.
when I was in high school. But no, I wouldn't say that doing what I did caused me to have Tommy John.
Yeah. It's always hard. There's so multifactorial, and hindsight's obviously always 2022. So, you obviously wound up at the University of Georgia. Tell me a little bit about, obviously the delivery is unique, right? And
Yeah.
the delivery it's very herky jerky. But you've obviously made it work for you, and we'll talk about obviously the success you've had. But was it always like that? Were you a funky delivery like back to Little League, or was it something that just kind of got to that point over the course of time?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been funky since I started pitching when I was little.
Yeah.
As you grow and get stronger and bigger, I mean, obviously things change in some ways, but I've always kind of been thrown differently than other guys.
Hmm.
I was fortunate enough to where I was always pretty good growing up, like in high school and playing travel ball and all that stuff, and so nobody really tried to make any changes in my delivery really
Hmm.
when I was coming up, and so. Uh, Looking back on it, once you go to college and all these scouts are coming to talk to you and they ask you about your delivery and all that stuff, and you have to figure out how to answer like why you throw this way and whatnot. And the best comparison I would make, and I think it's kind of funny because I felt like my answer was a little bit before almost my time, because now to an extent, nobody really cares how you throw as long as you're getting into these positions that
Hmm.
you're supposed to get into at certain times in your delivery. So the way I would describe it when I was coming out in the draft was, yeah, I throw a little bit differently, but you look at these hitters that do. I mean, every hitter is so different. They do all these crazy things. I mean, you look at all the different things Cal Ripken did when he was playing, like the
Hmm.
violin and all these different things. But the common thing you notice with all the players that are good, whether it's a hitter or a pitcher, is if they're good and they're consistent, they're usually getting into pretty good positions when they're at this right time. I mean, and so that's how I kind of would describe it to people. And so now the further I've gone along, the more baseballs you throw over the course of your life, you just your body starts to make changes and you get used to things and you start doing things that you don't realize you're doing. So you have to go and fix them. So you have to become more aware mechanically from that standpoint. And it's been fun learning a lot about biomechanics and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And as you kind of go through that, I think it's awesome because, it looks like a more heightened maintenance delivery, but at the end of the day, like you have checkpoints that you need to see when you go and you watch footage. And you're one of the more in tune with your mechanics guys that I've met and worked with. So what are those checkpoints for you? Like when you're going good, like are there things there that you feel? Are they things that you need to see on video? What is it that you're watching for?
Yeah, for shoes, I think the further you go in your career and the older you get, I think you don't really have a choice but to start to kind of learn yourself because at the end of the day, like you're your best coach. Like you know yourself better than anybody. And so I think the challenge that I've had as I've started to get further into my career is because I throw differently. I feel like I have to kind of try and stay on top of it a little bit more.
Yep.
Sometimes I could get you into trouble in the path my glove side's taking in the front foot strike. And so for me right now, just trying to kind of smooth out my upper half and tie it all together to my lower half. And so you're shifting into your front foot contact the way you're supposed to, and so it's hard to say really one specific thing that I look for as a checkpoint for me, but that's definitely I'm finding to be a big one for me. It's something that I'm kind of working on right now. While I'm coming back from my back injury, but I think just the overall knowledge that you can gain. Obviously having an archive of when you feel like you're at your best and being able to kind of go back and see some of the things and some of the movements of your lower half, your upper half, and what you're doing well when you've been at your best, and being able to reference that and compare it to where you're at right now. So then you can tweak little things in your delivery, and hopefully it can give you a chance to be consistent and have long-term success.
Absolutely. So, you had Tommy John at a young age. Was that kind of a blessing in disguise having that, your senior in high school where, you got a structurally sound elbow, but at the same time, did you learn a lot about yourself kind of as you went through that rehab process into your time at the University of Georgia?
Absolutely. I think, being an 18-year-old kid and finding out you have to have a Tommy John, you're kind of naive to some extent because you don't think like, oh, this is a serious, like, it's a serious injury, but you don't think like, oh, like this could have end my baseball career, which, people have that misconception, like there's a very high success rate with Tommy John surgeries, but guys don't always come back the way that they were before or better. And so I was really fortunate. I think if you're going to have it when I did, Georgia still honored my scholarship, and I got to leave in early August to go to the University of Georgia, and I was essentially having my own rehab program and people I was working with pretty much 6 to 7 days a week. And so I think that was a blessing because even now in pro ball, getting individual time from a serious surgery like that is tough. We had a good plan. I had a great trainer, Mike Dillon. I owe him a lot. When I was coming back from Tommy John, I started my throwing program. One of the biggest things, they shortened my arm action a little bit. And I actually, when I made my way back, I was throwing harder than I had ever thrown. I was probably up to like 91 in high school, like 88 to 91 in that range. And I still remember my first outing back, I was like 92 to 94, 91 to 94. Felt terrible, but I was throwing pretty hard. And then that was probably the first time where you really started to think about the movements and the things you're doing mechanically and what's working for you, and just your shoulder, all the shoulder care stuff you're doing that you can kind of keep with you moving forward to try and keep everything strong and healthy. And that was definitely a big moment in my life for sure.
Absolutely. And you were Tommy John, you had it after your senior year. So it was between the time you finished senior year and when you headed off to Georgia, correct?
Correct.
So with stuff like that, so you obviously missed your first year of Georgia. Did you come back and pitch in summer ball that year, or did you just wait?
So long story short, I pitched in a game for Georgia at 10 months. I came back.
Wow.
I came back,
Wow.
which was
Yeah.
really fast, really fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long story short, I only pitched one game. There was a lot of I wasn't supposed to play, but we didn't know that by this redshirt rule that we had, to where
Okay.
I got to keep my I had a pretty significant scholarship. I got to keep that, but I guess the fine print of it was that I wasn't supposed to pitch, and we didn't really know that. So I pitched against Georgia Tech, and we went to Arkansas that following weekend, and we landed, and the NCAA reached out and said, "Hey, he shouldn't pitch anymore. He's not supposed to pitch this year." So they tried to take away my red shirt actually because of it,
Wow. Okay.
and there was a big
But
deal.
you were, that's incredible that you were ready at 10 months, huh?
Yeah, and so so to answer your question, I did come back that summer. I went and played summer ball up in the NECBL in Keene, New
Yep.
Hampshire. That was quite the
There you
adventure.
go. Yep.
And I did pitch that summer on a 7 day. We were on like a 6 or 7 day rotation. Uh,
Yep.
it was a battle for sure, man. I mean,
Yeah.
early on I felt pretty good, and then as we moved on, my arms started barking pretty good. Uh, and it was a struggle to finish the summer, but we made it through, and then had that break. And then after I took that month off of throwing, when I got done with summer ball, uh, and made it back to start throwing in fall ball, I felt awesome, and was
Mhm.
probably as good as I'd been up until that point.
Yeah, it's crazy. We always have kids that ask about what the norm is, and you see the norms of when guys are back in big league games, but the average high school kid can't compare himself to what Steven Strasburg or Lance Lynn or one of these guys gets when they have it when they're already in the big leagues. It's a different level of care, and there's
Absolutely.
obviously contract situations and all that. So you can only compare yourself to you, and like 10 months is obviously very very early, and you also had a situation where wasn't ready to necessarily be really highly sustainable. So that's where you're dragging down the summer. So the lesson is only compare to you. Um, so fast forwarding, so your second round pick out of the University of Georgia, the Braves took you in 2012, and what's interesting and actually really impressive is you effectively skipped a big chunk of the minor leagues. You went right to low A after the draft. You pitched well. You skipped high A and started the next year in Double A. Threw well there and made only one start in Double A, and then you were in the big leagues at 2013. So it's a quick path. What made you a big leaguer so quickly? Why did you stand out, so much in that regard?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some of my buddy Kyle Farmer, who's with me with the Reds, he always talks crap to me because he says I never had to experience the grind at the minor leagues. But I was definitely I got put in a situation that was very beneficial to me. I got drafted out of Georgia my junior year in the second round. I knew that they had taken some college pitchers the previous years before me. They took Sean Gilmartin, I believe, the year before, and then they took Mike Minor maybe 2 or 3 years before that. And
Mm-hmm.
it had been expressed to me that the path that both of them had taken was, you sign. I wanted to sign quick. I wanted to go and show what I could do in A ball. The first year I got drafted, and then I knew that both Sean and Mike were fortunate enough to be able to skip low A and go straight to Double A. And then once you get to Double A, you're a call away basically. And so for me, I just had one thing on my mind. It was all I ever thought about was getting to the big leagues. Like I wasn't worried to. I don't want to sound weird. I wasn't worried about making friends. I wasn't planning
Okay.
on being in low A, high, Double A for any longer than they made me stay there. And so I went into big league camp. My very first spring training, I got to go to big league camp, and I probably ended up staying there longer than they were expecting me to because I threw pretty well in spring training. So I stayed there to the very last week, and fingers crossed for myself, hoping that they would send me to Double A. They ended up sending me straight to Double A my first full year, and I just put my nose down, and all I ever thought about was just throwing as well as I could possibly throw and getting the big leagues as fast as I could. And fortunately, it ended up working out that way for me to where I spent a month and a half in Double A. I threw really well and got the call up, and then it was history from there.
What were the biggest? You go to the big leagues quickly, right? So you're effectively there at 22, maybe even 23. What are the biggest things you learn quickly, right? The big leagues is not easy. They're there for a reason. What were the lessons that you kind of took on right away?
Oh man, I feel like there's so many. So I was fortunate enough that in 2013 we won the division when I was in Atlanta. I was up for most of the year. I was really lucky to be around guys like Brian McCann. Uh, Gerald Laird was one of our catchers. We had some good older guys that had been around and were very good for a long time up to that point. So one of the conversations I had with Brian McCann as soon as I got called up was, you don't want to young guy, you don't want to step on guys' toes, you don't want to disagree or do any of those things. And so I remember after my first outing, Brian McCann comes over to me and sits in my locker, and he tells me he's talking about what I like to do, yada yada yada. And I tell him like, hey, like, you know what you're doing, like I don't want to step on your toes. And he looked me straight in the eye and tells me, listen, man, I've never caught you until tonight. He goes, you know yourself better than I'm ever going to know you. He goes, and it's your career. He goes, you throw what you want to throw. And after that, that just trying to be yourself, like using what you have had that's gotten you to that point, but then also still being an open book and wanting to learn. And so Mike Miner took me under his wing when I started starting that year, and he showed me the ropes of how to kind of evaluate the teams you're facing, the hitters, getting a game plan to have the answers to the test, so to speak, before you're going into each outing or each start. And that was probably the biggest thing for me, was how to prepare from the kind of the chess match, the mental side of things. And to this day, it's probably one of my favorite things to talk about, favorite things to do, because that's what sets guys apart. The guys that prepare the best usually last the longest, and those are the guys that learn how to pitch and learn how to sustain and have long careers.
Absolutely. So here's an interesting. So obviously you were traded shortly thereafter, and 2017 was a big time breakout year for you. And I guess the question I have for you is, that also coincided with your first full season, actually excuse me, second full season in Los Angeles. You were 16-3, 2.72 ERA, and your strikeouts jumped a lot. Was that something that you felt like, was that the maturation process, just getting older, getting more comfortable facing big league hitters? Or was it something that you were consciously doing different? Was it a change of scenery going to LA from Atlanta? What made you so good in 2017 that year?
I think it was the best mechanically I'd probably ever felt. It was the best that my stuff had been, so that helped a lot. But probably one of the biggest kind of moments and realizations I've ever had in my career was I got hurt in 16 swinging a baseball bat of all things. But before that, I got off to a pretty good start, and I was striking out a lot of guys. But Andrew Friedman, our president, when I was with the Dodgers, they're kind of at the forefront of the analytics, kind of the game planning, all the stuff you could think of. And we kind of had a sit down, and he had a couple sheets printed off about how I was attacking hitters and whatnot. And he showed me, he basically said, hey, listen, you're elite at getting to two strikes. You're one of the best pitchers in baseball at getting hitters to two strikes. But up until now, you're at the bottom tier of putting guys away. And he said, I think that we should try and change your thought process to when you get to two strikes, because I can command it pretty well, to thinking about trying to put guys away no matter what the count is when you get two strikes on them. And so changing my mindset from kind of trying to throw a fastball up and away or off the plate or playing with guys, kind of changing your thought process to, hey, if I get two strikes, I'm thinking one thing, and it's to try and punch this guy out, and throwing competitive pitches to try and punch guys out. And that kind of changed my whole thought process and how I went about preparing and pitching two guys every fifth day. And I think that was a big realization in my career.
Absolutely. In 2015, 189 innings and 139 strikeouts. And then you look at 2017, 151 strikeouts and 152 innings. So you went from, basically being well below it to being actually like a K per inning. So, was that the kind of thing? Did you have to change the kind of pitcher you were, right? Did you pitch to contact less in order to go deeper into games? Or was it just one of those things where you're like, if I need to go 5 innings and punch out 10, I'll do it. Just because that's when I'm at my best. Did you have to emotionally kind of separate yourself from what was, I guess, perceived as a quality start in that regard?
I've never been somebody that's really thought too much about either pitching to contact or trying to punch guys out and not worrying about my pitch count. I just like that change in my mindset that I had. I was still trying to be around the zone and be competitive, but once you kind of get a feel for your one or two, or some guys have 3 secondary pitches or whatever it may be, and learning kind of where to put them when you want to kind of put a guy away. I thought that was a big thing for me. But in terms of thinking about pitching to contact, I know a lot of guys say that stuff, but usually the guys that talk about being able to pitch to contact or being able to punch 10 Ks per 9, usually their stuff is really damn good, so they can just say those things. There's not many guys to me that can go on the mound and say, hey, I'm going to pitch to contact today and try and go deep in this game. Usually, if your stuff is good and you're on, like, you're going to probably throw deeper into the game. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how I've
Yeah.
always thought about it.
Absolutely. And so, you mentioned stuff like don't be so hard on yourself. You've got a very, very good curveball, right? So, in 2018, you threw it over 30% of the time. That was maybe a little bit higher than the previous couple of years. So I'm curious, was it natural for you to learn how to spin the baseball? Like, is that something that you've had since you were 13, 14, or was it something that, you went through a lot to try to learn?
No, so I mean, I pretty much got drafted and then made it to the big leagues with just a fastball changeup. My breaking ball was really, really bad, always. Just kind of kind of the way I throw. It was harder for me to get in front of the baseball and spin it. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never really naturally been able to spin it ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so after my first year in the big leagues, I had talked to Roger McDowell, our pitching coach, and stuff, and that was kind of what I thought would kind of propel me forward into being like a legitimate big league starter every year, was to kind of be able to have a breaking ball that I could, dump in there early for strikes and have something that I could have as a put away. And so my first and second big league spring training, we had an unbelievable bullpen. Like, we had Craig Kimbrell, you have Johnny Bender's guys that have some of the nastiest breaking stuff at that time in the big leagues. So I was just trying to pick their brains about how their grips and how they throw their breaking balls. And the common theme and factor that I found was they all threw spiked curveballs or knuckle curve or whatever you want to call it. And so I started playing around with different grips with that spike breaking ball, and immediately it was pretty good, but I didn't really have a lot of command over it.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, the following year, after I'd been throwing it for probably half a season or a little bit more than that, in 2015, I believe, or 14, I believe it was, we were actually in LA early in the year, and I was just in the dugout, kind of playing with different grips on the baseball with that spike, and kind of found one that I thought felt really good. So the next day I was starting, and I went in the bullpen and never played catch with it or threw it at all, and just threw it in my pen. It was really good, and I went out and dominated, and I've been throwing the same one pretty much ever since.
That's awesome. So it really happened much, much later in your career. You weren't a big time high school prospect with an elite breaking ball. You had to find it over the course of time.
Yes, I could literally never spin it. I mean, if you look back to like in 2013 when I first started throwing the spike in that season, it was like okay, but it was more of like I didn't have command of it. It was more of a two strike pitch, hope they swing at it
Mm-hmm.
kind of. And then as I kept at it and found a grip with that spike that I really liked, it really started to evolve into a really good pitch for me.
So here's a question for you: is especially knowing that you had to put a lot of work in to learn that. So we've had like Adam Ottavino on the show before, and Adam's obviously a guy who spins it at a really high level, and he's always had that since he was little. And one of the things he's talked about is like he actually doesn't throw it nearly as much in catch play, just because he feels like it kind of gets him into trouble. Whereas you talk to like a Kluber will. He'll play catch with it, but he won't try to make it too big. He'll just try to feel the spin. When you're having your catch play, like between outings, are you a guy that tries to actually throw it in flat ground, or do you need to be off the mound to really feel like it's working?
I prefer to be off the mound when I'm really trying to throw most of my stuff. I like to throw flat grounds, probably once or twice in between sides, just to get that feel. And I'll spin a few and throw a few changeups. But I would say I'm probably the same way in terms of, because it's totally different being off a slope and being on flat ground. You know what I mean? The release point, how you're throwing mechanically. It's just different being off a slope.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like, if you feel good with your fastball when you're playing catch, you feel like it's coming out of your hand good, you feel solid there. Usually for me, at least, my other pitches work off my fastball. And if I feel good mechanically, like the ball's coming out of my hand with my heater, then usually everything else will kind of fall into place.
Absolutely. So you kind of hinted at it, but how are you structuring your in-season throwing program? So if you make a start on day 0, you got 4 days before your next start. What's that 4-day setup look like for you?
From a throwing standpoint, so probably
Yeah.
really the last 2 years, I have, you'll have your start day 1. I don't throw at all. I don't pick up a baseball. Day two, I'll long toss. I think these days long toss means different things for guys. I usually get back like 120 to 150, probably in that range on day
Mm-hmm.
two. Day three, I'll play catch to get loose, probably back to 90 to 110, and then I'll throw my pin on day three. And then
Mm-hmm.
day four is a light catch for me, and then start day five.
Exactly. So, what about the off season? When do you like to start throwing? Are you a guy that likes to take time off? Do you like to, keep it going? What's your approach?
So I pretty much have always been to where I've been really fortunate to be on some good teams. So we're always playing
Yeah.
it into October. I played into October every year except for one. And so usually, you finish in mid-October or late October the last 2 years for me. And so I'll take off probably, I guess, 7 weeks, 7 or so weeks, and get myself into December, mid-December to Christmas, in that area, and I'll start playing catch then. It's really intrigued me the last 2 years because you see more and more guys that are starting to throw earlier and earlier, and picking up baseballs after not taking more than like 3 or 4 weeks off. And it's something that's intrigued me, but I feel like that's a hard jump to make if you've never done it. It's something that I've considered, that I might consider this next off season, but we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember too is that just because you're off from throwing doesn't mean you're off 100%. I mean, you were on a flight the day after the World Series this past year to come get started on your off season. So that in of itself, you're doing something. It just doesn't mean you're throwing. But
Yeah.
yeah, playing the World Series that extra month kind of makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, man. I honestly, it's been a blessing because I've gotten to do a lot of cool things with a lot of the teams I've been on. In terms of going deep in the postseason, and that's really what you play for. And so I don't really know what it's like to finish October 1st, and have that whole extra month. I think that if that was the case for me, things could obviously change to where you might not take as much time off,
Mm-hmm.
as you do when you play deeper into October.
Absolutely. So, we talked about your in-season throwing program on a 5-day rotation. What about the day of a game? So, let's say you got a 7 o'clock start. What's your kind of setup look like? Your routine over the course of that, morning, afternoon, into the game time.
Yeah, so I'm pretty scheduled. I usually wake up. I usually eat breakfast at the same time, eat lunch at the same time. I'll always get to the field early. I'm pretty much sit there and wait for the other team to send their lineup over, and as soon as they send their lineup over on a game day, I'll go in there for however long it takes, 45 to an hour, write up my scouting report based on their lineup, and who I'm facing that day. And then there's a little bit of leeway. I'll have my like kind of a mid-afternoon, either a protein shake or snack or whatever it may be. And then if it's a 7:10 game, I'm usually in the weight room at about 5:45, running through just warming my body up, stretching, activating, doing all those things. And then I'll probably have about a 20-minute window between when I finish that and when I have to go out to be ready to pitch. And so that 20-minute window, I'll usually go and heat my back up. Usually sit down with our pitching coach and our catcher, and go over the scouting report that I've written up, that they have, things that they want to do and that they've seen, and things that I have written down that I've seen. Do that, and then go lace them up, and then go out, and I'll just I've warmed up pretty good by that point, and so I'll usually go out and stretch my lower body and upper body again, and then play catch to really whatever I'm feeling like I need that day. A lot of times it's based on the weather and what's going on, and then I usually pretty much throw the same bullpen in between starts and in pregame, about 25, 27 pitches, both sides of the plate, and then get ready to go.
That's awesome. What about actually like in game, right? Do you have like an actual process you use between pitches? Is there a certain like checklist that you go through regardless of outcome between every pitch?
Um, it really just depends. Usually I've got ingrained in my mind like my scouting report that I've written out that I'm facing. So I think that things can change drastically pitch to pitch. I still, I don't want to call it old school, but I'm still one of those guys. I like to see what guys are doing in the box, the swings they're taking. Do I think that they've kind of changed their approach based on them facing me and kind of having an idea of what I'm doing? I think things can change so much drastically pitch to pitch that you kind of got to be able to adjust on the fly. And a lot of times I'll have to step off the back, and talk to myself in between pitches about what I think I should do based on the scouting report says to this hitter and what I think is going on in his head. And then you kind of roll from there.
Absolutely. And you've also played for multiple organizations, right? So you came from the Braves, went to the Dodgers. So you threw to Grandal, you threw to Barnes. You're obviously in a new organization as well. Talk about building rapport with new catchers. Like Steve Cishek gave some really good insights in his interview on this, just about telling him exactly what you need and where to set up for different pitches. Is that something that you really go out of your way to kind of really work on when you first go to a new organization? Is getting on the same page with them, and what's kind of some of your feedback that you give them about you? How do they best manage Alex Wood?
No, absolutely. I think it's huge, and I think the thing you'll see now as much as any time is the catchers that are good. The ones that stay around and are playing every day. Most of them want to know what you like to do, when you like to do it. And so, I like when I got traded to the Reds. Tucker Barnhart, our catcher, reached out to me immediately. We started speaking as soon as we got to spring. Our first bullpen, he's wanting to catch me and start to learn me. And I think that most guys, especially starters, you have kind of a basic blueprint for yourself about what you like to do, where you like to throw each of your pitches, and then the rapport part. The other part of it is your catcher starting to learn when you like to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just that helps the catchers for you to be like, okay, I like to go down and in, up and away, back foot breakers, change ups away, whatever it may be, and telling them those things. And then you go even further about the setup you like. You like the guy to go on one knee. Like I like a guy to go on one knee down and away. The targets you like. I think it's really critical, and I think it's something that the really good teams, are they're leaving no stone left unturned. You know what I mean? Like they're doing
Yeah.
those things because it does help propel your guys forward, whether you know it or not. It was a big thing when I was in LA. Like a lot of our relievers, the targets they liked and when they were executing the best and when they weren't with certain guys. It plays a big role. And I think it's really, really important.
Absolutely. All right, so we go to a lightning round towards the end of every interview. So these are like the quick hitters where you gotta throw some whatever comes to your mind first at me. All right. So what advice would you give to a teenage Alex Wood?
Oh man, the advice I would probably give to a teenage Alex Wood is that, you always, as a competitor at any sport, you're always living in the moment. You want to pitch through injuries. You want to try and always be there for your teammates, compete at the highest level. That moment that you're in, whether it's a Tuesday high school baseball game or a Saturday or Sunday travel ball championship game, you always wanted to lay it on the line, but kind of thinking of having a more long-term approach to things and realizing that you're fortunate and lucky to play the game that you love, and that it's not always totally do or die. You're not gonna your career's not gonna be over if you don't pitch this travel ball weekend or whatever it may be. And I think just enjoying high school baseball, enjoying those travel games, enjoying college, and really also taking a moment to just enjoy those things, because once you get to professional baseball, it's a whole other game. It's still fun and you still get to compete, but it's your job, it's your career, and the outside world still sees it as a game, which it is, but it's also how you're making money to live for your family and the rest of your life. And so it becomes a little bit more serious. And sometimes it can be not as fun as, some of those high school games and some of those college games you play, where a lot of guys you're surrounded with, this is it for them, and that's really some of the funnest baseball I've ever played was, those high school state championships or those college games against your arch rival school,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
That's awesome. What about a college Alex Wood?
Oh man, that's tough. I think that like one of the best decisions that I ever made in college for myself was my first year, my sophomore year, when I came back and had my first full college season. I threw 100 innings. I got invited to go play in the Cape. Super excited about that, for that experience. But we get done with the season, and I was just absolutely torched. I threw 100 innings. And so the decision I made for myself was that I was going to not go to the Cape. I was going to stay in Athens and work out all summer and kind of iron some things out mechanically that I wanted to. Uh, and I think just if you want to go play professional baseball, if you're in college and your goal is to play professional baseball, it's just taking accountability of yourself and not expecting someone else to come and make you be the player you think you can be. It's having accountability always, and starting to really learn yourself and know what drives you and what you think is going to make you become the player that you want to be to get you to the next level, and just kind of thinking about those things. I mean, I feel like there's so many guys now. You go to college, you expect to play every day. It's not going to happen a lot of times. You're expecting these college coaches to turn you into something that you want to be, but either you don't have the skills to get there, or you don't have the drive or capacity yourself to kind of help propel you forward. And just, I think the biggest thing is accountability and starting to learn yourself, and realizing that you're your own best coach. Like that's never going to change. I feel like there's far fewer guys that have had someone from a pitching or a hitting or a fielding standpoint that's made such a dramatic impact on their career that they become this star player.
Yeah.
These guys you see that are superstars, they've had guys that have played key roles in their development, no question. But also at the end of the day, those guys know themselves. They know how to get themselves better. And I think that's just the biggest thing. If I was in college, I would just get that in my brain. Like, you're your best coach, truly.
That's awesome. And this is normally where I'd ask you to give advice to minor league Alex Wood, except you're only in the minor leagues for like 2 weeks, so it's not a valid question. All right, here's one I think I know. I'm going to know your answer, but we've gotten different answers from different guys who have been on. What's more important, stuff or command?
No, that's a tough question.
I know it's very philosophical.
I don't know how I should answer this. I would probably say, I mean, if you're in the big leagues, you have to have decent stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no question about it. There's no one in the big leagues that's been there for a decent chunk of time that doesn't have good stuff. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But at the end of the day, especially, I mean, if you're a starter and you want to be a starter for a long time, I mean, you have to have both.
yeah,
You have to be able to command the baseball to some extent. Obviously, the bigger stuff that you have, you don't have to command it quite as much. But I mean, look at the Scherzers, look at the Kershaws, look at the Klubers. I mean, you name it. Those guys are around the zone all the time. Their stuff is great, but they also command it, and that's what makes them the best in the game in the world. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I don't know if that fully answers it, because I'm saying a little bit of both, a little bit of both. But
Yeah, that's fair. I remember the first time I asked Corey Kluber it, and I said, what's more important? He's like, well, I think it's stuff, but when I have command of it, that's when I know I can be really good that day. So
yeah, and I think that from a starter to a reliever perspective, I mean, the way
yeah,
things are going now, I feel like I talk about it a lot, is with these relievers. You're seeing bigger stuff out of teams' bullpens than you've ever seen in any year of Major League history. You know what I mean? And a lot of those guys don't have great command, but they do one thing really well. They throw really hard, have a high spin rate, have an elite slider, or breaking ball, and they're using those things all the time. And I think that, I don't know how sustainable it is for guys' careers.
hmm
When you have that big time stuff, because you're not always going to have that big time stuff. It's not going to stay that way. It's not going to be like
hmm
Justin Verlander, that's 38 and throwing 95 with elite everything. You know what I mean? That
yeah,
just it doesn't happen like that for 99% of the guys. So, I think it's the further you go along, with how big time stuff guys are having, especially out of the pen, you forget they're not learning how to pitch. And so, yeah, at some point you have to learn how to pitch, because your stuff's not always going to be there. And I feel like that's how you last with your command, and with learning how to actually attack guys and having a game plan and things like that.
absolutely. All right, favorite teammate of all time and why?
Oh my gosh, man. How do I answer that?
You can answer more than one if you need to.
I guess it depends on the mood I'm in.
Yeah,
I probably the funniest teammate that I've ever had, probably Kike Hernandez, the Dodgers. He
yeah,
is an absolute clown all the time, but he's also works his tail off and is an unbelievable player. Uh, my hardest working teammate, Clayton Kershaw. It's
hmm
hard to find anybody that really just relentlessly goes as hard as he can, as much and for as long as he's done it. Uh, I've been lucky. My best friend from college, Kyle Farmer. It's hard not to say
yeah,
he's one of my favorite teammates. He's my best friend. Was groomsman in my wedding. I've been fortunate to be in LA with him, and Cincinnati now. But I've had so many good teammates. I've been lucky to
yeah,
be on a lot of good teams, and I think that the common denominator in any team you're ever on that's worth a damn is usually the clubhouse is pretty good. You usually have a lot of great guys that have a lot of the same goals and aspirations as you. And so I've been really fortunate from that aspect.
That's awesome. What pitchers do you like to watch, and why do you watch them?
Well, I'll start with the one pitcher that I hate to watch. Like, I was scrolling through Facebook like 2 or 3 weeks ago when Jordan Hicks's 102 mile an hour get me over sinker, and I can't even watch it, man. I'm like this is just ridiculous. Like if I could do that, that'd be crazy. But I mean, there's so many guys that I love to watch. God, where do I start? I mean, in LA, I love watching Rich. Walker Buehler's probably one of my favorite pitchers right now. I mean, he's just so special. His stuff. I love Kluber. I love Scherzer. I don't know. It's hard to choose one favorite. But obviously Max's competitiveness is one of my favorites. I mean, it's crazy to go watch how serious and competitive he is, and just talking when I've had the chance to talk to him one-on-one. I mean, he's just like that all the time. It feels like. But those are a few of the guys that I really enjoy watching.
Absolutely. All right. So you obviously had a kind of a progressive high school experience in terms of strength and conditioning, pitching. You went to the University of Georgia, went to the Braves, went to the Dodgers, now with the Reds. So you've been exposed to a lot of different, coaches. What are some of the big, things that you've noticed in the coaches that have been most impactful for you? What qualities they have? And then, on the flip side, what are some of the things that maybe haven't worked as well, and may have been impediments to your development and people you've interacted with over the years?
I think, it started for me in high school. I played for 2 different high school coaches, 2 of the best in North Carolina, Danny Hignite and Hal Bagwell. And I think the first thing is accountability. We every day, whether we were at the field or we were conditioning or lifting, you had a plan laid out every day. This is what you're doing. We're going to do it to the best of our ability, and they hold you accountable for those things. Just learning that responsibility for, if you want to do this and you want to be really good, having that accountability for yourself and for your teammates. I personally, I've always liked a little bit more of the old school. Like I don't mind being cussed out. Like if I deserve to be cussed out or yelled at or pushed a little bit farther than some normal coaches would do, I respond well to that. I've always enjoyed that aspect. Nowadays, it feels like you hear all these stories about these old school hard-nosed coaches that have been good for a long time getting in trouble with kids' moms and dads, like complaining for saying a curse word or whatever it may be. And I think there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, but I also think that is one of the biggest things for me. And then moving into college, I think that whether a coach makes it clear to you that he cares about you or not, usually guys can see straight through a coach that doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like when you truly see and know in your heart that your coach, your strength coach, your first base coach, your pitching coach, that they really do care about you, that there's no egos involved. It's just, I'm here for you to help you get better, to help you achieve your dream, or to help you sustain your dream, or whatever that may be. I feel like overall that's the biggest thing that there is, to know that this coach knows what he's doing, and he also cares about you as a person and as a man, to help you evolve into the player and person that you want to be. And I feel like that's probably the biggest thing for me.
That's a clutch answer, and that's actually a good place to wrap it up. Great parting words. So folks can find you on Twitter and Instagram. It's at awood45. Really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. We're excited to see you do your thing in Cincinnati too.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.